Insane Mike here again. Another video, another chapter in my favorite 100 films of all time. Let's get going. Gonna do another 10 here. So I'll try to get through them pretty quickly. Starting off with my favorite filmmaker, again, of all time, George Romero. And another one of my favorites outside of the Dead trilogy, and that's 1981's Knight Riders. This is probably my favorite film of his that isn't a horror film. To me, this movie is autobiographical. When I watch this movie, I get a real sense that George Romero wrote this with the subtext of his life as a filmmaker, his frustrations as a filmmaker, and kind of how he maybe even saw himself. And it's got everybody from the George Romero camp in it, which I think is also 100% intentional. It's got Savini in it. It's got Ed Harris, who was in Creepshow, which we'll talk about here soon. It's got John Amplas in it. It's got his wife Christine in it. It's got Ken Foree in it. Just anybody and everybody that's been in a George Romero movie shows up in Knight Riders, and also an amazing cameo by Stephen King in a couple scenes in this movie as well. So, Knight Riders from 1981. Next, another filmmaker that I really love is Joe Dante, and it's weird that we haven't talked about Joe Dante yet. He's also highly influential, and I love all of his movies. But it's weird to me that out of all of his movies, like Gremlins, Howling, Piranha, Matinee, that this is the one that makes the top 100. But it's a great movie, don't get me wrong. Another Tom Hanks vehicle, 1989's The Burbs. And again, it's got Joe Dante brings back a lot of his regulars as well. Dick Miller is in it. It's got Corey Feldman. A lot of great people in it. Carrie Fisher's in it, Bruce Dern, and it's hilarious. I miss the days of Tom Hanks doing goofy comedies like this, but it's also got some great horror undertones that Joe Dante is famous for. No matter what type of genre he's dealing with, he still gets all of his favorite influences in there, whether it be, horror, comedy, cartoons, whatever. But this is my favorite Joe Dante movie, one that I've watched over and over and over again. Now, you've heard me talk about this movie also on Attack of the Killer podcast quite a bit. It's another Linnea Quigley movie. It's probably my favorite Linnea Quigley performance of all time, and I love her in this movie. She doesn't get naked in it, and I admire that they actually allowed her to be a character in a movie and not just a set of boobs. And she's also the hero of the movie and survives the movie. And I feel like even as low budget of movie this is, and as how the acting's not the greatest or whatever, There's some great things that go on in it, including some character development with her character. She goes through an arc, and you don't see that a lot in these kind of movies. So I'm talking about 1988's, and also one of the greatest titles of all time, one of the greatest titles of the top 100, Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bolorama. I know this has been talked about not that long ago on our Little Creatures episode, and it got, by most of the crew, shockingly, did not like this movie. But I love it, and it's another staple of my USA Up All Night days. So it may have a nostalgia piece for me, but I've watched this a lot. The full moon Blu-ray of this is awesome. There is an amazing behind-the-scenes featurette on it that contains behind-the-scenes footage that have never been seen before, and it's awesome. And a great commentary track as well. Another filmmaker that I like a lot that doesn't get a whole lot I should mention too, another filmmaker that I really like, another filmmaker that I'm a fan of, is Dave Dakota, who directed Sorority Babes in Slimeball Bolorama. So we're in another stack, it looks like, of directors that are influential to me. Because the next one, I'm an M. Night fan. I'm an M. Night Shyamalan fan. And this is my favorite. This is, to me, still his best film, Unbreakable. It's a superhero movie, and to me, it's one of the best superhero movies of all time. And it's an original story. It's not an adaptation from something by DC or Marvel. So, and I've always said it's the first chapter of a superhero story, and I feel like we're finally getting the second chapter. If you had seen Split, but anyway, don't want to get into that. This is from the year 2000 with Bruce Willis. Great movie. If you've given up on Shyamalan a long time ago and have never seen this, go back and check this one out. It's better than The Sixth Sense. It really is. So it's his best movie in my opinion. Next up, what's some of the things you've learned about me? Well, you've learned that I like comedy, I like horror, I like documentaries, I like mockumentaries, and I like movies about making movies. So of course, I'm going to put from 2007's Brutal Massacre on this list. This is, I have This Is Spinal Tap on there, which This Is Spinal Tap is a great satirical send-up of the rock and roll world. This is a great satirical send-up of horror movie making world, independent filmmaking, horror movie making world, whatever. It's a mockumentary comedy for horror fans because it's got a super cast of horror alum. David Naughton plays the lead. He was the lead in American Werewolf in London. You got Gunnar Hansen in it, Ken Foree, ton of great people in it. Brian O'Halloran, Betsy Palmer. That's the name I was trying to think of. But it's just really funny. It's a mockumentary where like you kind of almost question, was this real? But it's obviously not, especially when you know the actors in the movie. But it even says right on the box, this is Spinal Tap for horror. And it truly is. And if you've ever tried to make a movie before, you can relate to a lot of the troubles that they go through in the making of this movie. And speaking of knowing people that have made movies before, I'm a filmmaker, and I've met a lot of other filmmakers over the years that I'm friends with, but this next one is by a film by a friend of mine that actually makes the top 100 of my favorite films of all time. And never have I been to a film festival where an independent, no-budget movie made by a local guy has ever impacted me the way this one is, and it's by my friend Joe Zerl. It's A Cadaver Christmas. This is just like Black Christmas. This is an annual viewing for me every Christmas. And there's a lot of these movies that like I've either A, watched over and over again, or B, I try to try to pick and choose when I do watch it because I don't want to burn out on it. And this is definitely one of those movies that I can watch over and over again, but also in fear of burning out on it. So it's hilarious. It's a total send back to the Grindhouse days, and even though it's got the scratchy film, which got played out, Joe did it before a lot of other people did it. So he may even been before they ever did Grindhouse. I don't remember. Maybe I'm gonna look. I'll look that up later. We're busy right now, aren't we? So speaking of mockumentaries, or actually documentaries, another documentary makes my top 100, and again, it's about making movies. American movie, and this is a movie that was hugely influential to me, starting up my company, Prescribed Films. I figured if this guy can keep making movies, why shouldn't I keep making movies? And it's because of this that inspired me to start up my production company, Prescribed Films. That and reading the first page of Robert Rodriguez's tell-all book from his days of making El Mariachi. That first page, I can still remember the quote. It's a quote that I live by. If you want to be a filmmaker, you are a filmmaker. So, moving on, going back to George again in this episode. Also, probably one of the greatest comic book movies of all time that's not based off of an original comic book, even though they made a comic book of it after the fact. 1982's Creepshow. This totally captures the look and feel of EC horror comics from the 60s and 70s. To me, each story in this anthology is just as strong as the last one. I don't think there's you get a lot of anthology films and there's like, that one doesn't hold up, but these other ones are just awesome. To me, every single one of these holds up. And again, it's George Romero and the crew doing, you got Ed Harris in it again, John Amplas is in it. But you also got other great people in it too, like E.G. Marshall. It's getting late in time. I'm getting tired, but again, Savini effects as well, and it's great. Now, I talked a lot about the fact that a lot of these movies have been inspirations to me. I should mention too, going back to Creepshow and Suspiria, which happened in an earlier episode of this series, was influential on how I like to light my movies. In particular, there's a scene in Legend Has It that is stolen straight from Creepshow, where on a jump scare moment, the physical lighting changes in the room with some crazy colored gels and whatnot. I'm a big fan of splashing color within my lighting scheme in my films, and it's because of movies like Creepshow and Suspiria that I do that. And so speaking of movies that have been a big influence on me, and also it's a movie that was a big influence on George when he made Night of the Living Dead, it's the other Vincent Price movie that makes my top 100 from 1964, Last Man on Earth. I've talked about before how I like films that are just super simplistic. I like low-budget movies that the lack of budget helps the film, and this is an awesome example of that. The fact that there was no money put into this movie, I think, helps this movie more than hurts it. It really adds a lot to the atmosphere of the film. I love the simplicity of it, how he is the last man on Earth. And there's some of these great drawn out scenes at the beginning of the movie where he's just going through his daily routine. And that is my favorite stuff of this movie. Not so much fighting the vampires or whatever the case may be, or when he finds the girl in the third act or whatever. I love the mundane stuff of him getting up, putting another check mark on the wall, making more wooden stakes, checking the radio, all that kind of stuff. Just how our mundane daily life is: we get up, we shower, we brush our teeth, we eat a little breakfast, we trot off to work. And in this reality of this crazy post-apocalyptic world where vampires are out to kill this one last man, and how he's got his own mundane, boring daily routine as well. So I love that stuff, so much so that my movie Collapse was highly, highly influenced by Last Man on Earth, where I have scenes like that, where he gets up in the morning, he just goes through his daily routine of just trying to survive this post-apocalyptic world. So much so that the lead character in my movie Collapse is named after Vincent Price's character in Last Man on Earth. So, lastly, in this video, this is the last one of this one. Another Fred Dekker film. The only other really Fred Dekker film. You got RoboCop 3, which actually I finally got around to watching for the first time ever, like a couple months ago. And it's not bad. I like it. And obviously you could see some great Fred Dekker influences in there, but you can also see where maybe he kind of lost control, and the studio influences have kind of dampened his creativity. But you could see some stuff going on there that is really Fred Dekker that I really appreciate. But the only real true hardcore Fred Dekker film that's not Night of the Creeps, obviously the other one being Monster Squad from 1987. Another great mashup of the classic Universal monster movies versus versus the R Gang, like the old R Gang movies. So again, I just love how Fred Dekker just mashes up genres into a film and it works. So that's it for this one. It's another 10 films down. So I think we're getting close, man. Should only be maybe a couple more videos of this, and then we're finally through my top 100. But I want to thank you again for donating to Patreon, and we'll see you again really soon on the next episode.